What about me?
You'll find out.
While trying to expose a billionaire, Carlton Drake, for using unethical testing practices for his pharmaceuticals, Eddie Brock comes across an alien symbiote in Drake's lab that bonds with him, using his body as a host and in turn, granting Eddie superhuman abilities. Venom's origin story heavily involves the character of Spider-Man, so it's surprising to see how well that origin story can work without that character. Tom Hardy's performance is one of the biggest selling points of this movie, especially when he's taken by the symbiote. He stutters, he stumbles, he generally acts weird enough and disjointed to the point that you do feel like he's struggling with another personality that has hold of his mind and body. Because of character and situational aspects, this movie doesn't exactly feel like a superhero film because the symbiote wants to eat people. On the other hand, some of the symbiote's efforts are geared towards stopping something evil, so it's not full-on anti-hero either. It can't even exist in this gray area. It's gotta be in the tannish beige area. However, the apex of the conflict is given most of its lip service near the end of the movie, and as a result it doesn't have as much time to cling on to the climax and affect the tone of it as it should. That might be in part due to the movie's tone in general, which I will get to in just a bit. In most stories about Venom, the symbiote is treated like the abusive partner in the relationship with its host, Eddie Brock. That aspect is touched upon in this movie, but I don't think the point is driven home quite strongly enough. And I think Spider-Man 3, for whatever flaws you might want to say it has, did get this aspect of the symbiote correct. And the symbiote didn't even have dialogue in that movie. And I do feel like I need to say that here because the symbiote, and by extension most of this movie, is quite funny. The humor's a little dark because, the symbiote is talking about eating people half the time, but there's also just such a casual nature about how these lines are delivered. The comedic timing is really good. That, and a couple of other pretty bizarre things that I will not spoil in this video. I just couldn't help but be laughing for most of this movie. I don't think I was the only person surprised when this movie's rating was revealed to be PG-13. I expected it to be rated R. I expected the film to be tense, maybe a bit scary, and certainly a lot darker than it was. Worst case scenario, I thought it was going to be a movie that tried a little too hard to be edgy and came across as a half-hearted, gritty reboot. What we got in this movie definitely didn't fit the darker nature of the symbiote as much as I thought that it should. That being said, I had a really good time watching it. My score for Venom is 7.5 out of 10.
He's waited for this night. He's waited for me. I've waited for him.
Get out the room! Get inside!
40 years after being re-incarcerated for murder, the silent killer Michael Myers breaks loose during a prisoner transfer and returns to Haddonfield, Illinois. But a woman he terrorized 40 years ago, Laurie Strode, has prepared for this. This movie operates under the notion that all of the Halloween sequels don't count except for this one, and it's just a 40 years later follow-up to the original 1978 film. That makes previewing homework for this movie blissfully simple. It's weird that they're still both just called Halloween, but I digress. I appreciate subtle touches in the writing of this movie that gave decent flavors of personality to some of the less prominent characters. It helps the tension because even though you figure some of these characters aren't on screen very long and are probably gonna get murdered, you get just invested enough in them that you kinda hope that they don't. This movie feels faithful to the spirit of the original Halloween by presentation, its portrayal of Michael Myers, and the techniques it used to make the audience feel uneasy. Jamie Lee Curtis played Laurie Strode in the original Halloween, and she reprises that role in this movie. I think the idea of this character becoming a hardened badass over time who wants revenge on Michael Myers because he killed her friends 40 years ago is something that really got people excited to see this movie, as well as the idea of these two characters clashing with each other again. Those people who got excited for that reason, myself included, shouldn't be disappointed by this movie. It was a huge aspect of the plot and probably my favorite part about it. The actors who portrayed Michael Myers in the original Halloween, both when he was in the mask and when he was unmasked, are back to portray him in this movie, as well as a stunt double. This is mostly trivia on account of the fact that this movie goes to decent lengths to try and not show you Michael Myers' face. but the returning talent does a really good job bringing life to this character again, so I'm all for it. Horror isn't usually my genre of choice, so I didn't have a very strong drive to go see this movie, but a friend of mine invited me to go do so I thought, why not? I prepared myself by watching the original film for the very first time, 2 days prior. And with the foundation of that original film going into this one, I had a pretty good time. If a sequel or two comes from this comeback, let's hope that they deliver on the same level of quality. Halloween 2018 gets an 8 out of 10. And that concludes this slightly shorter episode of Cold Cases for movies that came out in October. This is Detective Steve. See you in December to talk about November.